So for the 10 years, they're auditing you. You're filing, the corporations themselves, do they have to file audited financial statements?
No, these weren't publicly traded companies, but they're audited in the sense that, you sign your tax returns under penalty of perjury. And my tax returns each year were like more than 1,000 pages long each year. These are incredibly complicated things. And it was just another, huge burden as well.
Well, no, and one of the underlying allegations in the indictment, and it's the one that people, hang their hats on, is that you allegedly withheld information from your professionals as relates to the transfer of Bitcoin. Whether or not you want to comment on that, explain how they got your professional correspondence in the first place between accountants, between attorneys, because I don't think people fully appreciate, even if true, and I think it's attenuated whether or not you could possibly conceal anything, even if true, the fruits of the poisonous tree of seizing solicitor-client and privileged documents.
First of all, I'll say I gave my accountants and tax attorneys, I gave them everything they needed, absolutely everything. And so I didn't tell them what I had to eat for dinner the night before because that wasn't relevant, but for everything relevant, I gave them absolutely everything. They had full access to all my accounting books. They had everything, including all the Bitcoin transactions and all of that. And then the part that's just so crazy is the US, they didn't have whatever it is they wanted to charge me with. So how did they go about trying to figure out what they can do? They literally raided my attorney's office, right? So they literally showed up with guns on their hips at my attorney's office and raided my attorneys and said, give us all your information you have about your communication with Roger Ver. When you speak to your attorney in America, you're supposed to have what's called attorney-client privilege, which means whatever you tell your attorney is supposed to be between you and your attorney. So they literally violated that every which way from Sunday in regards to my own situation. I fought that all the way to the Supreme Court saying, hey, you're not allowed to do that. And I knew all the information they were trying to get there to was all evidence that proves my innocence. And so that's actually maybe one of the things that made them extra angry. They spent years and years and years fighting it all the way to the Supreme Court. Eventually, the Supreme Court decided not to rule on the issue, and we had to turn over a couple more emails to them. They are literally emails of me saying, do everything perfectly. I know I'm going to be audited. It's more information proving my innocence. So they were probably furious. They thought that they were going to get some really juicy information they could use against me. And instead, they got the exact opposite. They got more information proving my innocence. And so they were probably upset about that as well.
Anyone who has questions about this should go and read the motion to dismiss on freerogernow.org. The entire motion to dismiss is there, and it has all these emails. And you can see with your own eyes, Roger saying, I need everything done properly. I know they're going to come and audit me. I know they don't like me. Cross every T, dot every I. You can see it for yourself.
And right there, you can see the motion to dismiss, and then the government's reply, and then our reply to that as well. And if you don't feel like reading, a couple hundred pages there, just toss all of it into ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT for its opinion. And it literally starts saying that the government's position looks like a bunch of half-truths and misrepresentations. And it'll literally say that my side, seems much, much stronger. So if you don't want to read it all yourself, just ask your favorite AI language model.
But in order to raid your attorney's offices, they would have had to have alleged that your attorneys were conspiring in the criminality in order to breach solicitor-client privilege?
Right. That's what's also so crazy is the only way that you're ever allowed to have access to attorney-client communications is if there's what's called a crime fraud exception. So you have to say, oh, they were engaging in a crime together. Well, how would they have possibly known if they didn't have access? It's like a chicken and egg problem. And when they finally got access to the egg of my communications with me and my attorneys, all it was more information proving that I'm innocent. So the whole thing is just absolutely insane and not the sort of thing that's supposed to happen in America. And anybody that loves, America and truth and justice should be absolutely appalled at the way the IRS has behaved in my own situation.
Okay, now the question I had here was, I was going to say in terms of, they'll find emails that say do it properly, and they'll say, well, that's a dog whistle to do it improperly. Like when, in the indictment against Trump in Georgia, one of the allegations was literally Trump saying whatever the legal remedy is, and they still included that in the RICO conspiracy. I am not mistaken that they did not go through or bypassed any civil remedy entirely prior to proceeding to indictment and extradition and attempt to lock you up for over a century.
The entire time for the last decade, my stance to them is, if I owe something, I will pay it. You show me what I owe, I will pay it. Like if we did something wrong, show us, I will pay it. That's been the stance the entire time. And never once have they been able to show us what we've done wrong. And never once have they said, oh, pay this money, we think you owe us this. Like they have never, ever, ever, ever done that. And that just shows that this whole thing, they're just mad about me spreading Bitcoin to the world and my political views, not about, whatever, tax I did or didn't pay.
Tracy, maybe you can also field this one. They allegedly obtained evidence in violation of solicitor-client privilege, other breaking of the rules. What's the what did they do and what evidence did they purportedly procure as a result?
So they raided the attorney's office and they began questioning one of the junior attorneys there. And when one of the senior attorneys came along, he realized what was happening and shut it down. But by that point, the damage was done in the sense that a lot of privileged communication had been leaked, if you will. And so, like Roger was saying, they took this all the way to the Supreme Court. And because the Supreme Court did not stand up for the American law at this point, we're standing on the verge of a very perilous precipice, and that is the decimation of attorney-client privilege. If this case goes forward, if this is allowed to stand, if Roger goes away for the rest of his life based on stolen communications,
stolen communications that prove my innocence, by the way.
Exactly. The irony of that. But then at that point, it means attorney-client privilege is dead. Attorney-client privilege is dead if Roger goes away for this. And that should terrify every American, because we all should be standing firm to protect attorney-client privilege. It's one of our sacred rights as Americans. If we don't have that, we have nothing standing between us and lawfare. And so what gives me hope, though, is that in the last couple years, so many Americans have woken up to lawfare, and also Americans at the highest echelons, the most powerful ones. Because Roger was a victim of lawfare, he was just early. Then there was Alex Jones. Now there's Donald Trump. And now many members of Trump's own cabinet. And so because there have been so many more victims of lawfare now, there are finally people willing to hear and to listen and to understand Roger's story. Whereas 10 years ago, it was very lonely for you. Nobody else understood what he was going through. But now they've overplayed their hand, finally. And we finally have an administration in place that can say, you know what? We understand lawfare. We've been victims of it too, and it has to stop. And the only way we are going to move forward as a country, have a shot at national unity, is if this stops, and it stops now.
So this was under the Biden administration. This was at the same time when they were not only violating solicitor-client privilege in all of the Trump persecutions and set aside the Alex Jones as well. They were literally going after attorneys for the legal advice they gave to Donald Trump in a variety of contexts. If I may ask, and I don't know if I should know this, have they gone after any of your lawyers, your accountants, for any of the advice they gave, or have they sort of not flown under the radar, but have they escaped prosecution?
I don't actually know at this point, because the lawyer said to stop talking to all the other people that work for me. So like some of these people were my dear, dear close friends that, worked for me for, more than a decade, just like almost like family. And so like, it breaks my heart that I haven't been allowed to talk to them since all this started as well, because they were close personal friends of mine as well. And the whole thing is just really, really the opposite of how America's supposed to be. And it's really, really frustrating, and it needs to come to an end. And hopefully this new administration can see that and help, right these past wrongs.
And Tracy, in our locals community, someone's asking, please elaborate on why the Supreme Court didn't take the case. Did it deny cert, or did they issue any sort of substantive ruling on the issue?
They agreed to take the case, and there were oral arguments in front of the Supreme Court and everything. And I think it was something like there were 12 amicus briefs, right? Friend of the court briefs. 100% of them were in favor of my side. So every single, and that's my lawyer said that's unheard of for all of them to have even that high a number of amicus briefs, and then for all of them to be in favor of one side. But ultimately, the Supreme Court decided, even though they, went through all the motions and had oral arguments and the written arguments and everything, they decided not to actually rule on the case, which means the lower court's ruling stood. And we turned over all the documents then at that point, which then just proved my innocence again. If you don't have attorney-client privilege, what do you even need an attorney for? So they're just going to use them to incriminate you.